Hey Wargamers, it's Gregor. So, I haven't had an opportunity to make a speculation video or content overview like this in some time, and I'm sure that to some of you that may have come as a source of disappointment since that's some of my most popular content on this channel, and Armored Warfare is ripe for the picking for this kind of thing. There's seriously so much stuff you could do with this game that it'd be very difficult for me to compile it all. As for now, I'm going to talk about Israel. Specifically, main battle tanks from Israel. I think it'd be silly not to add them. And the thing that's so intriguing about Israeli tank development and their military technology in general is how their engineers took already existing machines and made them into their own through a great deal of upgrades. It shows a certain level of resourcefulness not seen by many. That's not to say everything produced in Israel has been adapted from other countries' tech. The last few decades have seen many variants of the powerful Merkava tank. In any event, Israel's history is riddled with conflict, so it's understandable that they'd have a lot of tank designs to choose from at the eve of the Cold War, and in a very short amount of time it found itself entrenched in conflict with its surrounding Arab neighbors, who of course didn't take kindly to the state's formation in the first place. But I'm not going to get into the politics of the whole thing. It's impossible to talk about Israel in a negative, positive, or even neutral tone without pissing someone off. I'm just going to talk about the tanks, alright? So, obviously, as a newly formed country, Israel didn't have a military infrastructure of significant build. Being an ally of the West, it was given a large amount of Western machines to fight with. In a relatively short amount of time, though, Israeli engineers managed to take a lot of these designs that were seen as somewhat outdated by others and make them into formidable fighting machines that could match the massive armies of Soviet machines that the Arab nations fielded. The first notable tank of Israeli origin would definitely have to be the Super Sherman, designated M50 and N51. The IDF never referred to either of these tanks as Super Sherman, but that's what these vehicles are commonly known as abroad. Obviously, the basic principle behind the Super Sherman was to improve the standard Shermans, which were the standard IDF main battle tanks at the time. The Israeli government had purchased a number of French AMX 13s, but operators of these tanks found that the armor was a bit lacking, but the gun was good, so the M50 then was effectively a Sherman with a better gun, more armor, and a better engine. Israel came across another powerful French gun, this big old 105mm. They mounted this to the Sherman once more, designated an M51. So effective military planning surely contributed to Israel's success in these early wars, but the effectiveness of the Super Sherman was something to think about in and of itself. It proved to be comparable, at least in terms of combat capabilities, to machines widely considered to be far superior in terms of technology. I think the M50 and the M51 would make great choices to implement at tiers 3 and 4, able to duke it out with like-tiered main battle tanks like the T-62 from long ranges with their powerful guns. Mid-tier is where things would start to get interesting. I break it into two branches here, and you have two options, really. So like I said already, Israel's stick was a good part of the 20th century, taking already existing designs and giving them upgrades. Eventually, the Jewish state was given a good number of Centurions and Patton tanks. Some Centurions were used alongside the Super Shermans, as a matter of fact, but the Centurions and Pattons were eventually upgraded into more modern designs. You could make two lines out of these vehicles. The upgraded Centurions were designated Shot, the Pattons designated Magak. There were two versions of the Shot made, and they served in the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War. The first version being the Shot Meteor, equipped with a Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, and this was eventually replaced by the Shot Cal, which were given diesel engines. Some of the Shot Cals were installed with more upgrades, even reactive armor. There were several versions of the Magak made, too many to list in the tree in my opinion, it would just crowd things. But the early models of the Magak actually fared pretty poorly during the Yom Kippur War. The term Magak was often used as a joke, meaning charred bodies carrier. But during the 1970s, the machine was improved. The Magak 6 was fitted with reactive armor, like how the Shokal was, as well as the Magak 7, though the Magak 7 looks a bit different than the original Patton it was based on. A good deal of angled armor, as you can see, was added onto the front of the turret. Sure looks like a tough piece of work, though. Perhaps the Magak would be the more heavily armored machine, and the Centurions would be the more range-oriented ones. I placed these two variants of both the Shot and the Magak at tiers 5 and 6. Eventually, though, the Magaks and the Shots were replaced by a machine that holds a good reputation to this day. The 1980s saw the dawn of the Merkava in combat. 4 versions of the Merkava have been made to the present day. I'd put the Mark 1 at tier 7, the Mark 2 at 8, and so on up to tier 10. The Merkava is such an interesting machine to me, though. The turret's located a bit closer to the rear than most conventional main battle tanks, and the engine is placed in the front. The idea behind this basically being better protection from frontal attacks. The Mark 1 and the Mark 2 used the same 105mm gun that was a common sight on other Israeli tanks. The Mark 3 was equipped with an indigenously developed 120mm gun, as well as a better engine. The most modern variant of the Merkava that came off of the production line in 2009 is the Mark IV Windbreaker. Windbreaker denoting that the tank is fitted with a trophy APS system. As far as other classes of machines are concerned, the MBT is the most common and most heavily utilized class on the modern battlefield, and naturally most of the technology available from the Jewish state consists of MBTs. But there's a good number of them that you could implement in our warfare. We haven't seen the Centurion tanks added to the game yet, so perhaps if they were added to the Western European main battle tank line, for instance, the same line with the Chieftain, it would be interesting to see how the Shots would compare to them, as well as the Pattons and the Magaks. I also think the Super Shermans would be some fun low-tier vehicles, and the Merkavas would rightfully be some of the most effective late-tier main battle tanks in the game. Obviously, my drafted line is probably very different from how the people at Obsidian would implement this, but it's some interesting food for thought nonetheless. I don't find anything wrong with a Middle Eastern dealer that could potentially offer machines from Israel and its Arab neighbors, lots of modifications of already existing designs, but they are there nonetheless. And the same argument could be made for the implementation of Chinese tanks that was done very recently. Oh, it's just a bunch of Soviet copies. Whatever, more variety is fine. It would be difficult to implement such a thing without getting people all hyped up about the politics of the matter, unfortunately, but one can dream. Regardless of what you think about Israel as a country, it's home with some of the most resourceful military engineers on the planet. Naturally, considering if they weren't there, it's very likely Israel, as we know it, wouldn't exist without them. I think these main battle tanks would be a welcome addition to Armored Warfare's meta. I'm sure Obsidian isn't too ill-disposed to the idea of these tanks being added to the game. Good luck out there, Wargamers. I'm Gregor. Thanks so much for watching.